A 100,000-ton aircraft carrier doesn't care about your stomach. When a wave the height of a 5-story building slams into the bow, physics wins every single time. The ship pitches 30 degrees. Everything not bolted down becomes a projectile. And somewhere deep in the galley, a cook is having the worst day of their life. So how do 5,000 people survive on a floating city when the ocean decides to throw a tantrum? Keep watching, because this gets wild. Let's start with something most people get wrong. Aircraft carriers are huge, right? The Nimitz-class carriers are over 1,000 feet long, weigh 100,000 tons fully loaded, and carry enough firepower to flatten a small country. You'd think something that massive would just plow through waves like they're not even there. That's not how it works. Not even close. The ocean doesn't care how big you are. In fact, the bigger you are, the more surface area you're giving the ocean to push against. A 40-foot wave hitting a carrier isn't like a speed bump. It's like driving into a liquid wall at 30 knots. The entire front of the ship rises up. Thousands of tons of steel going vertical. And then it comes crashing back down. The impact shakes the whole vessel. People standing below deck feel it in their bones. Here's the thing about carriers in rough seas. They're not designed to cut through waves smoothly. They're designed to carry aircraft. That means they've got a flat top, like a massive parking lot on water. Great for launching jets. Terrible for hydrodynamics. That flat flight deck acts like a giant sail. The wind catches it, the water slams against it, and the ship does things ships that size aren't supposed to do. Now before we go further, let's define what we mean by rough seas. The Navy uses something called sea state, a scale from 0 to 9. Sea state 0 is glass. You could water ski behind the carrier if they'd let you. Sea state 9 is what nightmares are made of. Waves over 46 feet, winds over 56 miles per hour. The kind of conditions where even thinking about being on a ship makes you seasick. Carriers try to avoid sea state 9. But here's the problem. The ocean is 139 million square miles of chaos, and weather systems don't file flight plans. Sometimes, you can route around a storm. Sometimes, the storm is 800 miles wide, and you're going through it whether you like it or not. And sometimes, you're in the middle of operations and you can't leave. The mission doesn't stop, because the weather got moody. The preparation starts hours in advance. This isn't like checking the weather app and grabbing an umbrella. This is battening down a floating city with 5,000 people and billions of dollars of equipment. First thing that happens is every aircraft on the flight deck gets secured. And I mean secured. We're not talking about tying them down with some rope. Each aircraft gets chained to the deck with multiple tie-down points. These chains are rated for thousands of pounds of force. They have to be. Because a 40,000-pound FSA-18 sitting on deck when a big wave hits, that thing becomes a multi-million-dollar pinball. The chains prevent that. Usually, everything else on the flight deck gets stowed or tied down too. Tool carts, maintenance equipment, tractors, anything that can move. If it's not bolted to the deck or chained in place, it goes below. This process takes hours and involves hundreds of people working in organized chaos. They've got a system. Everyone knows their job. They practice this constantly. Below deck, a different kind of preparation happens. That's the kitchen for you civilians. Has to secure everything. Pots, pans, dishes, food containers, everything. Heavy seas mean nothing stays where you put it. That pot of soup you were stirring? It's airborne now. That stack of plates? They're frisbees with sharp edges. The galley crew spends hours making sure everything is either strapped down or put away in secured cabinets. The medical facilities go through their own lockdown procedures. Medicine cabinets get secured with additional latches. Gurneys get locked in place. Any equipment that can roll has to be immobilized. You don't want an X-ray machine deciding to take a tour of the ship at 3 a.m. because nobody secured it properly. Living spaces get prepared too. Those 5,000 sailors live in berthing areas, sleeping in what are basically bunk beds stacked 3 high. In rough seas, people have been known to get thrown out of their racks. So they use straps, basically seat belts for beds. You strap yourself in before you go to sleep. Sounds uncomfortable, but it beats getting launched across the compartment when the ship drops off a wave. Personal items have to be secured too. That laptop sitting on your tiny desk? Better put it away. That family photo on the wall? Better make sure it's really attached. Anything loose becomes a hazard. I've heard stories of books flying across berthing compartments like paper missiles. A hardcover encyclopedia to the face when you're trying to sleep is nobody's idea of a good time. Now let's talk about what it actually feels like when the rough seas hit. You're standing on the mess deck, maybe eating dinner. Nothing unusual. Then you feel it. The bow starts rising. Slowly at first, then faster. Your body weight shifts backward. You're suddenly walking uphill even though you're on a ship. The angle gets steeper. 10 degrees. 15 degrees. Then it stops. You're suspended for just a second at the top of the wave. Everything feels weightless. And then the bow drops. The ship crashes down the other side of the wave, and now you're walking downhill. Your stomach stays where it was, somewhere up in the sky. The ship slams into the trough between waves, and the impact reverberates through the entire structure. It sounds like a giant steel drum getting hit with a sledgehammer. This happens over and over. Up, suspend, down, crash. Suspend, down, crash. It doesn't stop. It goes on for hours, sometimes days. You can't escape it. You can't make it better. You just have to endure. And here's what nobody tells you. Different parts of the ship move differently. If you're near the center, the motion is less extreme. The ship pivots around its center of gravity. But if you're up in the bow or back in the stern, you're on the end of a 1,000-foot pendulum. The motion is amplified. The bow can rise and fall 40 or 50 feet. People working up there, the ones managing equipment or standing watch, they're getting the full roller coaster experience. The worst part? The roll. Carriers are relatively stable compared to smaller ships, but they still roll. That's when the ship tips from side to side. In heavy seas, a carrier can roll 10 or 15 degrees. Doesn't sound like much until you realize you're standing on a floor that's now at a 15-degree angle. Try walking on a ramp that steep while it's moving under you and everything around you is sliding. The Navy measures something called the rolling period, which is how long it takes the ship to rock from one side to the other and back. On a carrier, it's usually around 20 to 30 seconds. That might sound slow, but when you're living through it, when you're trying to work, eat, sleep, and function, while your entire world is tilting back and forth every 30 seconds, it's exhausting. Seasickness becomes a massive problem. Even experienced sailors get seasick in rough enough conditions. Some people think you get used to it, that your body adapts. That's partially true for moderate seas, but in truly rough conditions, nobody is immune. The ship's medical staff goes through seasickness medication, like candy, Dramamine, scopolamine, patches, whatever works. Some people refuse to take it because it makes them drowsy, and you can't afford to be drowsy when you're working around heavy machinery or aircraft. People develop strategies. Don't go below deck if you can help it, because being inside with no horizon reference makes it worse. Focus on the horizon if you're outside. Your brain can't process the disconnect between what you're seeing and what your body is feeling. Eat bland food. Stay hydrated. Sleep when you can. And accept that you're probably going to feel miserable for a while. But here's the thing. The ship doesn't stop operating. The mission continues. People still have to stand watch. The flight deck crew still has to be ready if aircraft need to launch. The engineers still have to keep the reactors running and the engines functioning. The cooks still have to feed 5,000 people 3 times a day. Work doesn't stop because the weather is bad. Imagine trying to cook for 5,000 people when the floor is tilting 15 degrees every 30 seconds, and everything in the kitchen wants to kill you. The galley crew are absolute warriors. They're working with hot oil, boiling water, sharp knives, heavy pots, all while the ship is doing its best impression of a mechanical bull. They build edges on the cooking surfaces, barriers to keep food from sliding off. They wear non-slip shoes with extra grip. They work in short shifts because it's physically exhausting. The worst is when someone has to move something hot from one side of the galley to the other while the ship is rolling. You time it. You wait for the roll to level out, and you move fast. Carrying a pot of boiling soup across a tilting deck is an extreme sport. People have been scalded when the ship rolled unexpectedly and hot liquid went flying. It's dangerous work. But breakfast still has to happen. Flight operations in rough seas are something else entirely. The Navy tries to avoid launching or recovering aircraft in really bad weather, but sometimes There's no choice. Or there's a critical mission that can't wait. When that happens, the flight deck becomes one of the most dangerous workplaces on the planet. The deck is wet, it's tilted, it's moving unpredictably. Aircraft trying to land have to account for the fact that their landing target is pitching up and down by 30 or 40 feet. The landing signal officers, the people guiding planes down, they're calculating constantly. Where will the deck be when the plane actually touches down? If the deck drops just as the plane lands, it's hitting with way more force than intended. If the deck rises, the plane might miss the wires entirely and have to go around. The flight deck crew, the ones working with the aircraft, they're dealing with jet blast, spinning propellers, and a deck that won't stay still. They're wearing flotation vests in case they go overboard. Waves can come over the bow and sweep across the flight deck. Thousands of gallons of water moving at high speed. If you're in the wrong place when that happens, you're gone. Over the side into the ocean. They've got safety nets along the edges. But those are for catching people who slip, not for stopping a wall of water. When waves do come over the bow, the call goes out. Green water on deck. That's the warning. Green water means seawater on the flight deck. Everyone has to grab onto something or get to safety. The water hits with enough force to knock people down, to damage equipment. After it drains off through the scuppers, the deck has to be checked for damage. Tie down chains, safety equipment. Anything could have been ripped away. Down in the engineering spaces, the people keeping the ship running have their own challenges. The ship's nuclear reactors don't care about rough seas. They have to keep running. The propellers have to keep turning. But equipment in rough seas experiences stresses it wasn't designed for. Pipes vibrate more. Pumps work harder. Things that were fine in calm water start showing problems when the ship is being thrown around. The engineers monitor everything constantly. Oil pressure, coolant temperature, vibration sensors, all of it. They're looking for anything that seems off, any indication that equipment is about to fail. If a critical system goes down in the middle of a storm, when they can't get parts or outside help, it's a massive problem. So they're hyper-vigilant, walking around with flashlights, listening to engines, checking gauges. The smell of a bearing about to fail, the sound of something loose, they catch it before it becomes critical. The ship's stability is another concern. Water tanks that can be filled or emptied to adjust the ship's trim and stability. In rough seas, these systems get used constantly. It needs to be pumped out. The fuel levels are changing as the ship burns through thousands of gallons. The aircraft distribution on the flight deck affects weight distribution. All of this has to be balanced constantly, or the ship becomes less stable. There's a calculation the Navy uses called the stability margin. It's how far the ship can roll before it's in danger of capsizing. Carriers have huge stability margins because of their size and design, but in extreme seas, that margin gets smaller. The more the ship takes on water, the more weight shifts around, the less stable it becomes. The damage control teams monitor this religiously. Speaking of damage control, rough seas increase the risk of everything going wrong. A door that wasn't properly dogged down, that's sealed shut, can burst open when a wave hits wrong. Now you've got flooding in a compartment that's supposed to be dry. Water in the wrong place is incredibly dangerous. It adds weight, it can damage electrical systems, and it can spread to other compartments if not contained immediately. The damage control teams train for this constantly. They practice responding to flooding in rough seas, which means trying to seal a door or operate a pump while the ship is throwing you around. It's exhausting work. They wear full gear, breathing equipment if there's smoke or fumes, and they work in conditions that would break most people. But they do it because lives depend on it. There's also the psychological aspect of rough seas that doesn't get talked about enough. You're in a metal box, hundreds of feet below the waterline in some cases, and your entire world is shaking apart. You can hear the waves hitting the hull. You can hear the groaning of the ship's structure as it flexes. Metal fatigue is real. Ships flex and bend with the waves. They're designed to do this. But hearing those sounds, knowing you're surrounded by thousands of tons of water, it messes with your head. Some people deal with it better than others. Experienced sailors develop a kind of zen about it. They've been through rough seas before. They know the ship can handle it. They just focus on their job. New sailors, especially ones on their first deployment, They're terrified. They don't know what's normal and what's not. Every sound is potentially catastrophic. Every wave feels like it might be the one that sinks the ship. The senior sailors and officers work hard to keep morale up during rough seas. They project confidence, even if they're worried. They tell stories about worse storms they've been through. They crack jokes. They maintain routine as much as possible. Routine is comforting when everything feels chaotic. Sleep becomes difficult in rough seas. You're strapped into your rack, but you're still getting thrown around. The noise is constant. Metal creaking, water rushing, equipment rattling. Some people can sleep through anything. Others lie awake for hours, exhausted but unable to shut down their brain. The Navy issues earplugs, but they only do so much. And here's something you might not expect. Communication becomes harder in rough seas. The ship's intercom system works fine, but getting around the ship to relay messages in person becomes dangerous. You can't just walk down a passageway when it's tilting 15 degrees and water is sloshing around. You move carefully, using handrails, timing your movement with the roll. A trip that takes 2 minutes in calm seas might take 10 minutes in rough seas. The bridge, where the ship is commanded from, operates on a different level during rough seas. The captain and the officer of the deck are making constant decisions. Do we change course to take the waves at a better angle? Do we slow down to reduce the pounding on the bow? Do we speed up to get through the weather faster? Every decision has consequences. Taking waves head-on, bow into the waves, is usually the safest option, but it beats up the ship and the crew. Taking waves at an angle reduces the pounding, but increases the roll. Taking waves from the side, a beam sea, is the most uncomfortable and potentially dangerous. The ship can roll dramatically. The captain is balancing the ship's safety, the crew's well-being, and the mission requirements. It's not an easy job. Modern carriers have technology to help. Satellite weather data, advanced radar that can see storm systems hundreds of miles away, computer models that predict wave heights and wind speeds. The captain has way more information than captains had 50 years ago. But even with all that technology, sometimes you just have to ride it out. The roughest seas a modern carrier has faced, that's classified in many cases, because it might reveal operational details. But there are stories. Carriers taking waves over the flight deck in the North Pacific. Ships rolling 25 degrees in Indian Ocean cyclones. Captains who had to slow to just a few knots to prevent structural damage. These stories get passed around the fleet, told and retold, part of Navy lore. Here's the thing that ties all of this together. Aircraft carriers in rough seas are a testament to engineering, training, and human endurance. The ships are built to handle conditions that would destroy almost any other vessel. The crews are trained to operate in those conditions. When you've got a functioning carrier in the middle of a storm, 5,000 people doing their jobs while the ocean tries its best to break everything, it's remarkable. The ocean doesn't care. It's going to do what it's going to do. But the Navy cares. They've built systems, procedures, training programs, all designed to keep ships and people safe in conditions that would terrify most humans. And it works. Carriers don't sink in storms. They don't break apart. They ride it out, and when the weather clears, they go back to launching aircraft and conducting operations like nothing happened. Thanks for watching. If you want more deep dives into how the Navy actually operates, hit subscribe. More videos coming soon.